My name is Emma, and I'm the founder and managing director at Chief Disruptor. We're delighted you're tuning in for our fourth episode in this series, exploring what's shaping flexible working. This series is about innovative businesses and how they're embracing flexible working and empowering employees to work from anywhere. Over the course of 6 episodes, our guest speakers will delve into how they're rewriting the rules of work and how these changes enable them not only to survive, but to thrive. In this episode, we're exploring flexible working from the vantage point of working parents. We'll be discussing the challenges often encountered and how flexible working helps to enable working parents to balance work and family life. With a recent survey of 400 new mothers finding that 64% listed flexible work hours as the work benefit they valued the most, it's clear that evolution in how, why, and when we work has become even more paramount. And it's something that we're going to delve into today, a fundamental importance in how working parents can make the most of what they do. So joining me to delve into this topic is Laura Rosenberger, the co-founder of Laylo. Launched in 2020, Laylo is redefining boxed wines. Prior to launching Laylo, Laura was the chief operating officer at Naked Wines, and a startup consultant specializing in DTC, advising on strategy, performance, and operations. Welcome, Laura. It's fantastic to have you with us. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. So thanks so much for the invite.
Well, wonderful to have you back recently from South Africa and just enjoying some of the wines over there. So let's begin. Part 1, we're going to look at the evolution of how, when, and why we work. I'd like to start, Laura, with reflecting on your career to date. How have you seen norms on how and when work takes place change over that time?
So I started my career in investment banking in 2012, kind of fell into it, seduced by a careers fair, I think. And obviously that time in that kind of industry, flexible working just wasn't on the agenda at all. When I was thinking about this question in advance, I remembered a time when I had gone to a meeting with my manager, and on the way back from the meeting, we were walking sort of practically straight past my house. It was 4 p.m. So I said, I'll write up the notes from home and sort of see you tomorrow. And he looked at me like I was absolutely insane. He was like, really? Okay. And to his credit, he said, okay. But I sort of realized quite early on that we were very much expected to be in the office, working from the office, even when it sort of totally didn't make sense. So yeah, that was when I kind of started my career. And at the time I was looking at hotels, the hotel industry, when Airbnb was starting to become big. And I figured it would be much more exciting to be working for an innovative, disruptive company rather than talking about the threat of these companies to the kind of traditional businesses. So I left to work at a startup that was a high-end Airbnb style business called One Fine Stay. And there, hours were still quite long, but there was a little bit more flexibility versus what I found in banking. But I think the kind of big change for me when I think about flexible working with my career was my time at Naked Wines. So the head office for Naked was in Norwich and I was based in London. So I would go up there, I'd stay a couple of nights a week, and then I'd work from home the rest of the week. And there were quite a few of us that had that kind of working pattern. So I think I was quite sort of spoilt being able to have that kind of flexible working week pre-pandemic that I sort of only realised now was actually quite rare. So yeah, when we sort of started at Laylo, that was during the pandemic. We started off being completely remote, but I think we learned a lot about how to work effectively while not necessarily in the same place, which is what we've tried to integrate into the business here.
So Laura, you successfully launched your business during the pandemic, as you mentioned. What were the pros and cons of starting your business remotely?
So we had the idea for the business in July of 2020. I founded the business with Laura Ritchies, who was marketing director at Naked Wines when I was there as COO. And she was also commuting up and down from London like I was. We were staying in a flat together. So we were sort of firm friends as well as colleagues. And I had the idea that someone needs to make boxed wine great. There's no reason for boxed wine to have this terrible reputation. There's no reason for the quality to be really low. And I messaged her to say, I've had this idea and I'd love to get your view on it from a marketing perspective. And she said, no way, I've had genuinely the same idea. I've started working on it. This is what I think. And it was like the most incredible validation that this was potentially something that had legs. So we met during lockdown, July 2020, and started the business. And met socially distanced in the garden, I should add. So we started the business remotely. We were used to working together remotely because that was the kind of thing that we used to do while we were at Naked Wines. So I think we fell quite naturally into a good working relationship as former colleagues and as people who were used to working remotely. So there was only really sort of pros. I don't know how people sort of used to prioritize spending money on office spaces or working together at this very sort of early startup stage pre-pandemic. So I think it's sort of fairly typical to be starting a business remotely anyway. But yeah, I'm really sort of grateful that we knew how to work closely together, and it felt very much sort of like a business right from the start, rather than sort of two pals, you know, seeing what we could do because we were so used to working together. So yeah, no real cons initially. I think as we've grown the team, which we did in 2022, it's shown that when you're sort of starting a business from scratch and culture is so important, you do need that face-to-face time to make people really understand what you're trying to achieve as a business, how we work, what's important. So I think the cons only really came later.
Interesting. Because as an employer, how do you approach that flexible working now you've grown? How do you balance flexible working policies with the need to collaborate and embed a company culture? All very tricky. How do you approach that?
Yeah, so we were very sort of inspired by our time at Naked Wines, and decided that we would have fixed days where we work in a co-working space together. So that everyone knows on Tuesdays and Thursdays, we work together. That's where we do our collaborative work. That's where we sort of do the sort of more fun things like wine tastings or getting lunch together, and getting away from the kind of grind of sitting at a laptop all day. And I think the benefit of having some sort of fixed boundaries within a flexible working culture is that people can plan their lives around it. So for instance, I live an hour's commute from our co-working space, and on those 2 days our nanny stays longer so that I can have a longer day in London. And if it was a purely flexible working environment and someone could turn around on a Wednesday and say, oh, I really need to see you in person on Wednesday, that would actually be quite tricky for me with that long commute, with balancing childcare. So having those sort of boundaries in place, I think, is actually really helpful.
And also, I think for everybody else, isn't it, try and get the sort of not mundane, but more of the administrative things done quietly at home, and then really get the energy and the creativity going in the office, and the enjoyment and really that sort of well-being as well, really coming to the fore. What advice do you have for founders and small to medium-sized business leaders?
Mm-hmm. So I think it's important to define what flexibility is, because it could be flexibility of days or location or hours, or can you work, could you go to a yoga class in the morning and make up for it in the evening, but then could that have a knock-on impact on other people within the businesses? So I think it's just important to define exactly what flexibility looks like for you and make sure that everyone's on the same page. I think also defining sort of how people communicate is really important.
So let's move into the second part, so disrupting a market and becoming a founder. Laylo is a true market disruptor. The business is disrupting the age-old wine industry by transforming the humble box of wine into a sustainable and desirable option. Where did the idea come from for the business? And also, how did you turn the idea into tangible business?
So we both worked at Naked Wines, which I think was one of the kind of original wine disruptors. That was launched in 2008 and was, incredibly innovative at the time. So we were very sort of comfortable with the idea of shaking up a fairly traditional industry. And I think we were just sort of quite surprised that throughout our time at Naked Wines, we hadn't really given boxed wine a thought. And it was only during the pandemic, when reading the kind of trade press, we'd seen that boxed wine sales were rocketing, that we had both independently come to the conclusion that the perceptions just don't really match up with the reality. So, even for us, my initial reaction when I saw that was, oh, boxed wine. And it was only when digging into it that I realized there's actually loads of benefits of boxed wine. So it stays fresh for 6 weeks from opening. So during the pandemic, when people weren't going out so much, it's great for having just a glass when you don't want to necessarily open a whole bottle. And even now, sort of post-pandemic, a whole bottle of wine, even between two, even over the course of a couple of days, isn't necessarily how the average drinker wants to drink wine at home anymore. And then the second big benefit is that the glass is very heavy, it's very energy intensive to produce, it's very breakable, it's very bulky, and the cumulative effect of all these things versus a box of wine is that boxed wine has a 90% lower carbon footprint than bottles, which is huge. And it's quite an easy, sustainable swap to make without compromising on the quality of the wine that's inside. So we kind of realized that there's a job to be done to change perceptions, and we can do that through designing beautiful boxes so that people realize as soon as they see it that this isn't the same as boxed wine they may have had previously. We can do it through sourcing incredible wines. So there's no technical reason anymore why you can't put great wine inside a box. In the 80s, when boxed wine started to get its terrible rep, it was because the quality of the bag that's inside wasn't good enough to maintain longevity of the wine that was inside that bag, but that problem has been solved. So yeah, by putting great wine that really sort of surprises people when they taste it is another part of that job. And then the third part is creating a really fun, accessible, interesting brand around it. So we very much try to be taking all of those things that we learned from Naked Wine, so down to earth, no jargon, no pretension, just really great wine that you want to drink with friends over dinner in front of the TV.
And certainly having drunk it in the office for events and so on, that you've kindly shared it with us from, it's been absolutely wonderful. But also, as you say, the sustainability, the design, not having to feel like you're forcing a bottle of wine down you because it's only going to last a day or two. It's a real game changer, so congratulations on it. I'd love to sort of delve into the gender gap that we've got at the moment when it comes to British entrepreneurs. A report produced by the chief executive of NatWest found that the UK economy could be boosted by £250 billion if more was done to closely look at the gender gap and indeed to close it when it comes to British entrepreneurship. What do you think needs to change to encourage more women to start their own businesses?
So I think there's two parts to this. First is funding. So, we all know that the rate of VC funding for women is absolutely abysmal. I think it's less than 2% of VC funding goes to all female founding teams. And it's, it's just crazy given the amount of brilliant female founded businesses that are out there. A stat that I saw a couple of months ago that I thought was really, really interesting is that women make up 85% of all household consumer spending. So it just blows my mind that there's not more funding for female-led businesses, female consumer businesses, because who's going to best understand that target market is going to be women. So there's a huge job that needs to be done in making funds more accessible and available for women. And then I think the second part is childcare costs. So, we've got the second most expensive childcare system in the world. My childcare bill is more than my salary as a kind of startup founder. And I just wouldn't be able to do this job if I didn't have, support to be able to do it from, our kind of brilliant nanny and, all the people that enable me to do what I do best during the day by sort of supporting with family life. And it just sort of feels like a very neglected part of society. I think Pregnant and Screwed are doing an incredible job at trying to raise awareness of how just sort of neglected by policy childcare is in the UK. But we're just sort of so far away from having a system that has, makes childcare affordable for everybody.
Absolutely. And I think add in a pandemic with homeschooling for many people with children of a greater age, those not being able to have nannies help with younger children, so on. That was an incredibly tough time. And the resilience of those that actually were trying to launch businesses in that period was just absolutely incredible and really inspirational. Building a strong network of suppliers, partners and advisors is essential for founders. How do you build your network, and how has it changed in the age of remote working?
So I think saying yes to introductions when they're made, and going in open-minded and having a kind of conversation where you figure out what both of you are interested in, how you can help each other, has been really, really helpful for me. And it's been very sort of interesting how often we've gone to someone for advice, or we're given a general introduction, and then that's led to something brilliant happening, whether that's being then introduced to an incredible new investor, or a new potential partner, or being invited to speak or go on podcasts. So I think just sort of being open-minded and saying yes even when you're very busy is very, very important. One thing that myself and my co-founder have both tried to do in the last few months is engage more on LinkedIn. So posting more. I think it feels very a bit sort of cringy when you first start doing it, and I found I was spending ages trying to craft like the perfect post, and the more you do it, the more the cringe disappears, and you can just put something out there and not stress too much about have I spelled everything correctly, what are people going to say. So that's been amazing, and really sort of kicks off conversations with people. So not just posting, but then making sure you're interacting with people underneath your posts, supporting other people that are posting themselves. So LinkedIn has also been incredible for networking. And then the third thing that I do is I keep a spreadsheet of people that I'm speaking to, what they're interested in, what their sort of area of expertise is. And I've kind of done this on and off over the years, but in the last few months really tried to make sure that I'm putting people down on there, because when we have a problem, when we need help, when we have opportunities, I can go through that list and it just sort of jogs my memory of all the amazing people that I crossed paths with through the course of the year, and then can get in touch with them again, because it's quite easy sometimes to sort of meet someone new but then you never speak to them again. So it's sort of turning those introductions and those conversations into a long-term relationship.
Yeah, fantastic. What we used to call the little black book, probably years ago. Thank you so much. As a DTC business, so a direct-to-consumer business, you connect directly with consumers to build a loyal customer base. What tips do you have for leaders from SMEs who want to connect more effectively with customers online?
So I think the benefit of being a small business is that people like to support small businesses, and I think often people fall into the trap of trying to give the perception that they're bigger than they are, and sort of make things quite sort of formal and look very official. And when you're a small business, your differentiator is that you're small and that you can be personal, because ultimately you're never going to compete on price, being small versus the big guys, Amazon or whatever. So that's your superpower really, being very, very personal. So when we started the brand and being a wine business as well, we knew that it had to be, our brand had to be very accessible, and one way for us to do that is by us personally being the voice of our marketing. So it's sort of very down to earth, very personal. So all of our emails come from Laura and Laura at Laylo. We have little booklets inside our orders where there's a little welcome letter from us alongside information about the wine. And it's just very nice that even when people are kind of interacting with our brands, when they say have a problem, a delivery issue, they're like, oh, hey, Laura, my order didn't turn up. Can you take a look? Even though, it's not necessarily us kind of answering that email at this stage, but people feel very sort of connected to the brand through the fact that we're the face of it, which I think is really good. So that would definitely be my advice, to sort of put yourself more into the brand as a founder. And again, it can feel sort of a little bit kind of cringy at the start. I personally don't necessarily feel very comfortable doing that kind of stuff, but the more that you do it, the easier that it becomes.
And certainly over the years of running Chief Disruptor, that's been a very common theme. Really get involved, whether you're disrupting the laundry market, whatever it is, get out there on your bicycle and do what, do with the job of what your team are doing, understand, put your face there, take those calls, go on the end of the customer care line to understand what's going on, send those personal things. Bloom and Wild have done that very well, haven't they? And so many businesses have done really, really well. So that's really, really good to hear. I'd love to also then focus as the sort of third part on achieving that elusive work-life balance, which has been talked about for many, many a year. As a new parent and as a founder, what advice would you give to someone who's about to embark on a similar journey?
I think it would be to make sure that you have support in place, because there's no way that you can do it all on your own, and you're not going to get any sort of prizes for trying to do it all on your own. So it's figuring out where you can get that support, what it is that's important to you and that you want to prioritize, and then what else you can sort of delegate or get help on. I think it's really interesting that when someone becomes a new parent, people are so generous with their gifts, but ultimately they're often stuff, they're things. And yes, when you have a baby, there's a lot of stuff that you need, but for your own sanity, you need support. And I've got a friend who had a baby a couple of months ago, and they live in the Netherlands, and it's typical there, I think maybe even for every couple, that there's a doula, so a kind of specialist support that comes to the house for a few hours every day, every week, to help them in those early months. So I think just making sure that you get that sort of personal support rather than just the kind of support of stuff is really, really important. And then I think from a kind of working perspective, it's making sure that you get the right type of flexibility. So I had my daughter very early on in the sort of journey of Laylo, at the point that we were still 100% remote, and that was amazing for me because it meant that I could be here at home, and we had a nanny to look after my daughter during the day, but I could still feed her, I could still go downstairs and sort of see her and enjoy spending time with her, and then also not miss out on work because everyone else was remote too. It's not that I was the only person not in the office. So that's been really, really helpful for me as well.
An awful lot to juggle, isn't it? Pre-pandemic and even post-pandemic, the emotional juggle, let alone the physical, and then obviously bringing colleagues and the understanding. So on, I think hopefully post-pandemic we've learned a lot about looking after each other when it comes to families and allowing people to have more of an active and vocal work-life balance, which is so important. I think far more fathers, I think, particularly have enjoyed it too, in terms of working from home or not necessarily jumping on those flights as regularly as they had to historically, going to those sports days, those productions or concerts, whatever else their children might be in. So hopefully we've moved in the right direction. When it comes to achieving the elusive work-life balance, what role has flexible and indeed remote working played for you?
Mm-hmm. So I think it's been absolutely crucial, like especially when she was tiny, sort of exactly as I said, around still being able to be there for the times when she was awake, when she was little, but then not necessarily have to be there 100% of the time. I think that's been really, really important. And then being able to cut down on commuting time has also been really important. So being an hour from my office, I couldn't imagine doing that 5 days a week. Yeah, that's exactly what I would have done without question pre-pandemic. So being able to cut down on commuting time and spend that time at home instead has been really important.
I also like to look at that always on. I think as a founder, there's always a sense of importance when it comes to always on and contactable. How do you achieve the balance between work and rest? I know we've talked about work and life, but particularly work and rest. How do you get that balance?
Yeah, it's hard. And it's hard sort of being glued to a mobile phone where, even just opening my mail app, I don't just see like my personal mail at home. I see our customer service email, I see my work email. Like, you know, it's just really, really hard to switch off. So I think you have to be quite sort of strict with yourself and how you get sort of personal boundaries and habits in place to make sure that you do. Yeah, I think it's very easy to kind of think that things can't run without you, but you find that they totally can. So I've just been on holiday and hadn't realized before I went that my mobile phone plan didn't cover for roaming in South Africa, and it was going to be a ridiculous, like, you know, charge per megabyte. So it meant that I could only really, you know, use my phone, check my email when I was on Wi-Fi. And on the first day, I thought, oh my God, like, you know, what am I going to do? I'm not going to be contactable. Oh my God. But it was actually amazing and was incredible for being able to switch off a little bit. That I had certain times during the day when I could check my emails, and then other than that, you know, if someone really needed something, you know, they'd call me, and you know, you just have to kind of trust that your team knows exactly what they're doing and can handle things without you, and that was exactly the case. So maybe sometimes we all just need a little bit of enforced you know, time to switch off, to realize that, you know, you're not crucial to the success of your business every single minute of every single day, and that it's fine to take a little bit of time away from the phone.
Yeah, and I certainly find where we can do that, you come back so refreshed, re-energized, clearer thinker, but also that creativity comes back. I think when we're in the sort of day-to-day, it's so difficult. We do see those, you know, Elon Musk of this world and various others saying you must get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, you must do your sport, you must do all the rest of it. But actually, I'm not sure that's right for everybody.
Yeah, definitely.
We're nearly out of time. Thank you so much for your insights, Laura. But before we finish up, I'd love to end with a quick fire round. So my first question to you is, what trend do you believe will have the biggest impact on your business in 2023?
So I think there's a trend towards drinking less, but drinking better. So whereas previously you'd have a gin and tonic whenever you felt like it, or you'd open a bottle of wine, I think people are being more intentional about their drinking. And that really works well for us at Laylo, because boxed wine is the way to have just a glass and not end up drinking a whole bottle. So yeah, drinking less, but drinking better would be the big one for Laylo this year.
Yeah, and I've certainly seen Laylo on the front cover of some very big press last year, which was fabulous to see. But I think also in that same press, not the same edition, but certainly we're seeing, aren't we, that we're all drinking probably more than we should do. So it's great to see that those two things can balance because of your offering there. Next of all, what is your go-to career advice?
I think it would be asking yourself at the start of every day, what's the one most important thing that I could do today to get to my long-term goals? Because I think it's just very easy to get wrapped up in the day to day and not think about what is sort of truly going to move the dial for, you know, your projects, your business. So yeah, what's the one most important thing that I could do, and then making sure that you do it.
Great piece of advice. So often the big things get pushed to the end, don't they? And then X weeks later it happens. Certainly, I sometimes find that too. What would you say is your go-to form of communication? Is it email, phone call, text message, Teams, Slack, or something else?
I'd say Slack. So yeah, being a sort of 60% remote business, that's the center of everything, even when we're working in the same office.
Yeah, and always a juggle, isn't it, to make sure you get the right tone and everything else from that. And finally, your go-to remote working environment.
Definitely a coffee shop with a bit of a buzz and good quality coffee.
Lovely, fantastic, and certainly some good ones in London there, and also all around the world that we can enjoy. Thank you so much. That's been a fantastic discussion. A really big thank you to you, Laura, and fantastic to see what you've achieved. A big thank you to those of you who have been watching, and if you do have any thoughts or questions, please do reach out to us at Chief Disruptor, or indeed to our partner GoTo, for more information on any aspect of the discussion today. And please be sure to catch up with more of the episodes in this series on the trend shaping the future of flexible working. Once again, thank you for joining us, and have a great rest of your day.